Hey gang, yeah, it's been a bit of a long day, but I think we're just going to give it a try, and we're going to talk about the astral body, the third part of the Fourfold Human Being, and its various contexts. So let's just start with the animal kingdom, I guess. So the clear difference between, say, plants and animals, and I mean, in the general sense, is, like sapience or whatever, like responsiveness to stimuli, like a sensory like attachment to the environment. Right? Plants do not respond to external stimuli, at least not in any like way that a nervous system does. And so the difference between an animal and say a plant is the presence of this. It's called an astral body. Um, it's called that because it's related to the planets and to space. It's like a cosmic body. Its origin is in the stars, and the laws that it obeys are the laws of the cosmos and planets, which have to do with like sympathy and antipathy and resonance and vibration and such. It's like laws of the soul, and they don't work like mineral laws, and they don't work like even the laws of life. They're a whole own thing, which I don't particularly understand, but I do know it exists, and it's good to know that. So that you don't project physical ideas or concepts onto something where it really has no place. You can learn these things yourself just through examination, but few people have mapped these things out. I mean, people like Jung, people that have really like delved into the psyche with earnestness and not like a lot of preconceptions about what's there, have made some progress. But the whole like sum total sensory psychic apparatus that people have, that's like an astral body. It's what allows you to actually sense. Because in order to sense, you need two things. You need like something sensitive, right? And then also something to sense with. The two can't be one and the same. And so the physical body is a substrate for sensing, but the physical body by itself is not a sense body. It's not soul like. It's just stuff. And then the whole thing with nerves, we talked about that in the first lecture. The idea that like there are motor nerves that send impulses back down to the muscles in order to motivate them is not true. The only nerves that there are sense nerves. We move muscles with a direct action coming from the astral body and other bodies too. We won't go into that right now. But the astral body is like it's soul like, it's soul spiritual. The human's soul is consistent of the astral body and the eye like together. But in the case of an animal, it would be accurate to say that yes, the animal is ensouled. It has a soul, but its consciousness does not rise to the level of a human being. Basically, animals are always dreaming, even when they're awake. Their relationship to the outer world is dreamlike, right? It's symbolic, but they don't suffer from like symbol confusion. It's almost like a sort of natural animal clairvoyance. Like they apprehend the situation directly. And not that they don't use their like physical senses. It's just that everything is quite different. There's sort of a bias that you think like, oh, if you look like the way that a horse perceives the world is like more or less like a human with like some changes in angles and visions and colors and stuff. But actually, it's like fundamentally different to see through the eyes of an animal, because an animal is only a product of a group soul type configuration. It doesn't have like an independent identity. Like every human is like an animal species of one. Every human is a unique expression, whereas animals are always of like a type, right? And you say, well, humans are always of a human type, but that's beside the point. You'll see later that that's kind of like we have to work through the animal substrate for different reasons, but that doesn't make us identical with it. Um, so animals have these group souls, like um, kind of like the way that your eye controls all of your various limbs and body parts. The animal eye, the group soul, controls all of the animal forms, like the variegated groups of animals. Like it's sort of like an oversoul or whatever. So like Giselles have a Giselle oversoul, lions have a lion oversoul. It's like a species soul. Yeah, I don't think it's really quite accurate to think of it as like puppeteering marionette style. It's just that like fundamental impulses that would be defined by the I in the human being, like that are determined from a certain inner process, just flow from the outside in animals. Because, like we said in some of the other lectures, all of these other kingdoms of nature still have the same fourfold quality that humans have. It's just that their other parts cannot manifest on the physical plane. They remain in a spiritual context, which explains things about them that supersede their mere physical reality, like we're talking about here, the etheric body, the astral body, these clear divisions, which can be understood like very readily as fundamental qualitative differences, but also quantitative differences. That humans have more bodies available to them, more senses, more interfaces, more different cosmoses, really, plugged into a lot of things at the same time. In the Rosicrucian like cosmology context, the astral body it was implanted during the moon phase. So as we've said before, there was ancient Saturn, right? Not to be confused with like the modern planet of Saturn, a condition where the planet was made only of heat and absolutely gigantic by modern proportions, like the size of the whole solar system practically. Next came the sun, where there was a densification of heat into air and also a rarefication of heat into light upwards. That was the sun epoch, also a huge planetary body which still didn't have planets, just like maybe I think a ring or two. It was only in this next phase, moon, where there was a further densification to water, where it became a standard thing for there to be say a sun and a moon. I won't go into the cosmology exactly, but it became necessary for certain spirits who needed to work at a more rapid pace to stay ahead of the evolution of other people to guide it. They had to leave. And so they took a lot of the ethers and other like rarefied elements like light with them to the sun to work with them there. And then they would beam those things in a modified form from there to the planet. So like the sun working from the outside onto the moon, which in this term would be moon and earth. I mean, there weren't a bunch of planets. The main thing was a sun with the moon going around it. That was moon phase, and it was during this that humans received the astral bodies. So they were basically like plants before. And then they received this sentience where they became more animal-like in their whole constitution. And I mentioned group souls before. This is just like a random fact. We can't even get into angels right now. And I haven't mentioned like the humans that predated us, that although it would be incorrect to think of them as humans like us because they never were incarnated into Earth and never experienced like individual exiled consciousness like we did, they were in the driver's seat of the human like form at the time. And so on the moon, the angels, like our immediate predecessors, were running humans, but they did it at a group level. They weren't running individual humans. Humans were more like animals at the time, and so the angels ran them like an oversoul, but they did it with like full consciousness. But they would have they have a sort of interesting relationship to the animal oversouls in today's consciousness or today's context. But humans weren't merely animals, because humans always have this kind of like divine quality or essence in them, and so like angels wouldn't be able to do that with animals. Not that animals really existed, but I'm getting off point. It's just that like humans were in this preparatory stage where they were kind of right below these entities that were also working through the human to refine it. So it's like the angel's activity on the body prepped it for the humans to step into it. The next phase, I don't want to get too much into cosmology right now, but it's just these things are interrelated. So the astral body, even though, it started in the water, the densification of the water phase, but it itself was heat. Like, as we said, physicality gets driven down further, and that creates sort of like more slots for the insertion of bodies via the elements, because each of these elements is like a cosmos or a force in itself. And so it allows you to interrelate and stack these things together. It's really quite brilliant, as you'd hope. So, at this point now, the astral body is associated with air in the human being. And so it's not the same as your astral body, but your physical mechanism of inhaling and exhaling breath, right? This taking in and out is a reflection of your astral nature. Like you do this because of your astral body working on you from the other side. Um, from like an occult perspective, you actually breathe your true self in and out from the outside at every moment. Like this is not your true self. You bring your true self in from the cosmos with each breath. I mean, it's kind of funny because it sounds preposterous and it's also kind of an oversimplification. Um, I just realized I think maybe that buzzing was me drumming on the desk. How long have I been doing that? Very conscious, very good. Sorry, I'm still learning this process and the thing's a little bit shaky, but not to get off point here. So let's see, we've got the elemental basis, we've got the fact that it's stacked third against the animal. So the astral body is what underwent the sort of like corruption of quote unquote original sin. Like I can't go into original sin right now, but I just need to say out of hand that it is not what it is often presented to be. We fell, but it wasn't our fault because there was no way we could have resisted. I mean, some beings did resist because like literally they just like rolled lucky on the cosmic lottery. They were made of like the sternest stuff. Human beings are not responsible for the fall. Like we don't. The wrist slap thing about it is way off base, but I'm not going to get into that right now. It's just the fall's corruption affected the astral body, the sensory body, right? It coarsified it and had us start sensing things that were lower, which also gave us freedom because things were no longer infused with the like inevitability of spirit. Like a rock could just be a rock, and then we would have to like theorize about a rock because the rock wasn't like telling us its eternal essence every moment we were like listening to it or whatever. That pedantic arena was absolutely necessary for the development of human freedom. And so of course you call it a fall, but the whole point of the fall is to rise with new faculties. And so I mean it requires a much subtler approach to the understanding of, you know, evil and corruption than simply like this was bad and we want to flee from it. It's like you got to make something of it. You don't want the corruption to be a waste. You want to have learned something. It redeems everybody involved to the extent possible. And because we're humans, because we're partly divine, we have the ability to do that if we so choose, if we believe it about ourselves anyway. So it's the astral body that has to undergo purification generally first when you're undergoing like occult training, because it's the thing that is attached. It's like it's actually not even attached to your ego. Like first you just get used to honoring your preferences as if they're really what you want morally. That's kind of like when you're a kid and you don't make a differentiation, but later on, of course, you do make this differentiation between what you want. Like, oh, I really want ice cream. It's like, but I know I shouldn't have it because whatever, I'm lactose intolerant, I'm on a diet, whatever your reason is, right? So those two conflicting inner voices, it's like your astral nature, right, that desirous sense nature, and then the moral center, the I, which we'll talk about next time, which is that divine faculty where you can bring down moral law onto the physical plane. That you as a human being are able to operate through orienting towards future outcomes instead of simply being a slave of past actions. That's a gift of the I. That's a gift of what comes as a result of having the astral body to like insert that into, because in order to have this self-consciousness, first we need this like sapient, sentient substrate of an astral body to work from. And so human beings spend quite a bit of time as animals, right? There are so many things about the scientific theories of evolution which are like not all wrong or whatever. Like they hit on some things that are actually sort of fundamentally true, but they put them in the wrong context. Like the whole idea of like evolution and stuff, it's not totally backwards. Like humans were animals at a point in the past, and even arguably plants in a certain sense. You know, again, it's complicated. But some of these hunches aren't totally wrong. It's just that the context is wrong, and that, you know, things descend from above. There's no other place that they actually can come from. And if anything appears to be coming from below, it's because originally it split off from something some time ago. Like all the activity of like earth spirits or Ahrimanic spirits. It's like, well, they all originally descended from the divine. It's just that they've been cut off for such a long time. That kind of goes into the whole Tantra thing again. But anyway, I'm kind of running out of time here, and I think you've got a general idea of, you know, the astral body, the sensing body, the body of desires and stuff. It's the one that leads to corruption because it's very new. Like the etheric body goes all the way back to Sun. The physical body goes all the way back to Saturn. Like Lucifer couldn't corrupt those bodies. They were too exalted. The astral body was only like just one epoch away. And then, like, I mean, the moon epoch was essentially Lucifer's native epoch. He was like a super advanced, like, angel initiate of that time. And so he was like he was a master of all that moon stuff. Can't really talk about Lucifer right now. We're just talking about astral body, and I think we're gonna wrap it up because we're just at about the right time. Did I do 15 minutes or 19 minutes before? It's fine. And I even wandered all over the place. But we'll see how this does. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that was informative, and I will be coming back to you with the I, the fourth part of the Fourfold Human Being. And then we'll start talking about all the other ways you can chop up a human being. There's like a 9-fold way. There's like a 7-fold way. But we'll focus on what will be relevant for us moving into a discussion of like the evolution of these things over cultural epochs, because that's the one understanding of these things that we haven't touched on in this fourfold thing is how these slot into the civilizations of history and how you can see the development of particular spiritual and soul qualities existing during epochs of history. It's like you see how these things are true when you know what to look for. Thanks very much, everyone. Goodbye.